Alright guys, welcome back to Matthew's Ballistics. Today I'm going to test some hand loads, but before I do that I am going to shoot some of the 120 grain ELD match and confirm my zero and the typical velocity with those. And then we'll go to the hand loads, and then we'll do the same thing with the AR-10 build. We'll shoot the 120s, get a good zero on it, and then shoot the hand loads and see where they're at. And then once we're done with that, with the 6.5 Creedmoor, we'll move on to the 454 Casull, and then we'll shoot a couple rounds out of the 338, and then we'll move to the 200 yard and then the 300 yard and do the same there as well. Alright, so we got it re-zeroed because for some reason it was shooting about 4 inches to the left. And now I'm going to use the hand loads I've got, the 145 grain bullets, so it's zero for the 120s, and the tuner brake's set for the 120s, but I'm not going to mess with that today. We're just going to see how the 145 grain Barnes match burners do. They're shooting quite a bit lower in velocity. The 120s are running in 2750s to 2800. These are probably going to be quite a bit slower than that. $24.98. $24.90. $24.76. $24.62. $24.91. $25.22. 145 grain Barnes match burners, the hand loads at our new target, and we're going to check the velocity on those. I'm going to go ahead and go for 6 rounds of that. Got an error. 23.91. $23.71. $23.76. $24.28. $23.82. So pretty consistent velocity for those rounds. Again, they're lower velocity because I'm using pretty much the maximum load I could use using the IMR 4166 powder, so, and that weight of bullet, so we're getting a little lower velocity but actually a really consistent velocity, so I think that's pretty good. Now we're going on to a totally different caliber, going to a 454 Casull, and I loaded these rounds specifically for this lever action. So they're loaded at 30 grains of H110, and the overall length is 1.672, so that they're short enough to cycle in the lever action, which is what my plan was. I'm going to shoot 10 rounds at this target, and we'll see what kind of grip we get. I'm doing 2 5-shot strings. second. $2,004.
Same spot.
$2,001.
You drop
1,987. $2,002. This thing kicks so hard.
I don't know where that was at. That last one was in the 9 ring, just like just red.
Yeah.
It's in the 9 ring, just right up here above it.
Oh.
All the rest of them are down here on your left, below your horizontal line, and that one of them's way down south.
Got an error. $2,005. Same test, only I'm going to shoot the Browning 1885 with a 28-inch barrel, and these loads are loaded at 32 grains of powder, so they're a little hotter. The overall length's a little longer on them. $2,181. $2,138.
Okay, you're out of the ring, you're further out on the right.
Okay.
Same area.
$1,175.
Edge of the black on the right.
I think it's funny how this rifle shoots right and the other rifle shoots left. $2,192.
You're on the line on the second green ring coming in. Woo. 9 ring.
$2,159. $2,179. Now, moving on to something I've never shot before. I traded my 50 cal for this 338 Lapua, and it came with 10 hand loads, and Yeah, most of the time you probably shouldn't shoot somebody else's hand loads, but I'm going to anyways. This ought to be fun. I'm going to shoot under the target and see where it goes. It went high, 130 feet per second or so.
Still over the top.
Yeah.
We don't know where you zeroed it to start with, whether you zeroed it at 100 or 200 yards. You might have zeroed the thing for 400 or 500 yards.
I'll bring it down a whole nother resolution and see what happens.
Look. Should be in the door.
Okay, now we're on target. 2832. Alright, we're going to 300 yards. And hopefully I did the math right on this.
You got it.
Hit the target.
Okay. It's just I seen that dirt blow up down
Yeah,
there.
all that dirt kicked up went way.
Yeah, I was like,
the red.
hmm. I don't think the silencer would work much on that thing.
Last one. Well, I finally made it down here to 300 yards, and this is first time ever shooting a 338 Lapua, and it's not bad. Of course, I'm using somebody else's hand loads that came with the gun, but there's our shooting position way up there, and here's our target. Looks pretty good. I'm going to send some more 6.5 rounds at this. We should be able to tell the difference in bullet hole size. Alright, I'm going to do one last bit of shooting my hand loads at 300. I've done the math and come up 20 clicks on the scope, and I'm going to see how close that is. Alright. Alright, hopefully my math is right on this one as well. Oh. Now, let's go check that target out. So I didn't do too bad with the 6.5 shooting a Simmons 8-point scope at 300 yards. These are my hand lows, the 145 grain Barnes match burners, over 35.3 grains of IMR 4166. The average velocity is 2,490 feet per second. So I got 14 rounds on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then I've got the 4 big 338 Lapua hits on there. So I think with the most of them here, the majority of them, all but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were outside of that, and that's at 300 yards. I think that's actually, it's not great, but it's still a pretty good group. So yeah, having fun today. Alright guys, so we're back at the house. It's actually a couple days after we were at the range, but I'm just now getting to where look at the load, or the data I gathered on several different rifles and calibers there, and then we'll get to take a look at the targets and talk about those just a little bit. So getting into this, we started out shooting the 6.5 Creedmoors. So I kind of wanted to get into some of the load data on that. And this is using on the 145 grain Barnes match burners, and I'm using IMR 4166 Enduron powder. And again, that powder is a little bit, it burns a little too fast for using this heavy of a bullet. So what happens is you see pressure signs very early, very low in the charge weight. So you're limited on how much powder you can use, and that ends up limiting your velocity quite a bit. So with the 145 grain match burners, and I used a powder charge of 35.3 grains, and I talked about this a little bit before, and the reason why I used that powder charge was for a 142 grain bullet. The only published load data I could find for IMR 4166 with a bullet above like 130, there was one load data published out there for a bullet of 142 grains, and that max charge for it was 35.5 grains, and I believe it was 60,900 and something psi, so it was right up there about the maximum pressure you want to use. So for a 6.5 Creedmoor, so I'm using a 145 grain bullet, which is just slightly heavier, 3 grains heavier in bullet weight, and so I went down 0.2 of a grain in that powder charge, and the results I got, though the velocities were low, the results I got with the extreme spread on the velocity were actually pretty decent, all things considered, and actually the accuracy was pretty decent on them, and we will get into that here in just a little bit. So out of the 22-inch barrel of the Ruger American Predator, the velocities, I tested 6 rounds in it and recorded the velocities. Velocities were 2,498 feet per second, 2,490, 2,476, 2,462, and 2,491, and then 2,522. Now, there's 2 in there. There's an extreme high and an extreme low velocity, and the extreme low was 2,462, and the extreme high was 2,522, which is 60 feet per second difference in velocity. So that's actually not that bad, especially using this powder with that bullet. If we took those out and then used the other 4 velocities, the lowest velocity would have been a 2,476, and the highest would have been 2,498, and that would have been an extreme spread of only 22 feet per second. So that would have been incredible if we'd have got all 6 of those within that about 20, 22, 25 foot per second range. That would have been really great. Now, that was in a 22-inch barrel on the 6.5 Creedmoor Ruger American Predator. And then we moved on, and I used the same load in my... Actually, these were slightly different. I changed the seating depth a little bit different. I bumped it down 10 thousandths of an inch. So the seating depth for the Ruger American I used was 2.805 inches, and the seating depth I used for the AR-10 was 2.795 inches. So 10 thousandths of an inch different, 10 one thousandths of an inch difference in seating depth. And then I used the same charge weight and everything, same type of brass, same primers. So the first round I got an error on it, didn't pick up. The next 5, we got a 2391, a 2371, a 2376, a 2428, and a 2382. So the lowest velocity was 2371, and the highest was a 2428, which gives us an extreme spread of 57 feet per second. So almost the same as, within the same realm of shooting it from the American Predator. Of course, this being that these rounds were shooting about 100 feet per second slower. Of course, this is a 16-inch barrel in the AR-10, and is also gas operated, which does siphon off some of the pressure in the barrel and can result in an added decrease in velocity. So if I had taken the 2 lowest ones out of that, or the lowest one and the highest one out of that, I would have had a low velocity of 2376 and a high velocity of 2391, and the extreme spread would have been, I believe, 15 feet per second, which would have been really tight. That would have been nice. But and then I added some notes in here on some of this. I had, during the loading process, I had a couple of issues. I had a couple other pieces of brass. Like, there were 2 pieces of Winchester brass in here, and when I was weighing the cartridges, the Winchester brass weighed about 25 grains, or about 20 grains, 20 to 25 grains heavier than the Hornady. The Hornady brass all weighed about, like, the loaded cartridges, the finished ones. The Hornady's all weighed 330 to 330.6, I think, was the highest. So they were all pretty close. Like, that's a fully loaded cartridge, bullet, primer, powder, everything. And then the Winchesters were 350.3 and 350.6 was what they were. And then I have found some other rounds, some of the ones that I had seated for deeper for the AR-10, and I actually found that there were 4 rounds that I may have undercharged by, I undercharged them by about 10 grains of powder. I'm pretty confident that's what happened, and I'm not sure how that happened. I don't really know, because all the brass is the same, but there's 4 rounds that weigh 10 grains less, so that concerns me. And I'm going to use a kinetic puller. I'm going to go ahead and pull those bullets, and then resize the case neck and everything, and then reload those for the next time I go to test, because I want to keep things safe. All right, and then then I got into shooting the Rossi Puma 454, and I'd loaded ammunition just for it, and I measured and weighed everything out, and my results were actually really astonishing with it. My extreme spread and the velocity was like in the single digits. It was around 8 feet per second or 9 feet per second, I believe. And I used 30 grains of H110 in those. My OAL on the cartridge, the overall length was 1.672 inches. Used a CCI 400 primer, and I used a bunch of mixed brass. It was some Hornady, some Starline, and I believe there might have been one or two other brands in there too, but it's just mostly Hornady and Starline. And what surprised me the most was like everything, and some of the brass has been fired multiple times, like 3 or 4 times, and some of it's only been fired 1 time. So, and I didn't really keep track of all that, but I just grabbed some random loads, and out of 10 random loads, I got an extreme spread in the single digits on the velocity, which was fantastic. Now I'm shooting this rifle with the stock buckhorn sights that are on it at 100 yards, and I've done that before, and I've gotten really, really good, actually decent groups out of it. But I did that shooting from a lead sled. This time I didn't use a lead sled, and I just kind of braced off a range bag that we had. And so my grouping on that was not the best. Of course, you know, you're not going to go to the range every day, and you're not always going to shoot a really fantastic group. So, you know, some days you're going to have really good days, and some days you're just going to shoot pretty mediocre. So, with all that being said, I'm going to get into and look at these targets. Start with my first target, hopefully. Okay. So this is the 145 grain Barnes match burner out of the Ruger American Predator, and as you can see, this is 6 rounds. I got 3 right there, 2 down here and 1 here, and that one just seems kind of like it was a bit of a flyer. I probably pulled the shot or something. And then one other thing to note is I did not adjust the tuner brake that's on that rifle, the harmonic tuner for the 145 grain bullets, because I didn't really want to spend the time it takes to do that, where I reset it to 0 and then spend the time of firing 2 shots and then seeing how they group, and then, or 2 or 3 shots and seeing how they group, and then change it and then fire 2 or 3 more shots and see how they group, and then change it and fire 2 more, you know, and so on and so on until I get the right setting. I end up shooting quite a bit of ammunition to do that, and it takes a lot of time because, you know, I'm going down to the target, measuring it with calipers. But if you were to measure this 3-shot group, we get a .408, which is not bad, and then this 2-shot section here was .23, and then that 1 shot out. But if you were to measure the whole thing, it basically shot 1.5 MOA, maybe a little bit less on the average, right under 1.5 inches at 100 yards. Now, like I said, the tuner brake's not set for these. The velocity on these bullets is very low, considering the powder I'm using. You know, there's a few factors into that, and plus I could have been shooting it from a more stable position. I could have had a lead sled and been shooting it from there, but I was shooting it off a bipod. So with that said, I'm going to move on to the target, shooting the same rounds except for seated just a little bit deeper. Let's see. Here we go. Go to the Barnes match burners out of the AR-10. Now what you'll immediately notice is they all hit the bottom of the target. And I kind of knew, or kind of was thinking that was going to happen. The 120 grain bullets, and I'll show you, actually, this is, I didn't do any adjustments on this at all. So when I shot the AR-10 with the 120 grain bullets, they all hit a little bit to the right, They could have been, and I later adjusted that over, but it was shooting about 1 MOA right, and there you go. I didn't adjust the the vertical axis on the sight any. I just adjusted it over 1 MOA back left. Again, shooting this, it's got a 5-power Burris prism scope on it, so, and I'm shooting it resting it off a bag, not a bipod or a sled, so my accuracy with it is as such. I didn't do bad, but obviously there could have been some things to have made it better. So when I went to the 145 grain ones, because they're traveling quite a bit slower and they are quite a bit heavier, they all hit there in the bottom of the target. Now, the grouping is actually better, which I was surprised to see, is they were actually more consistent and more accurate. And even shooting that little 5-power scope, I was able to pull off the length on this from that shot to that shot is 1.628, and the width of that horizontally, the width on it is under an inch. It is about 0.75 inches wide there. So windage wise, I did really well as far as being able to hold my point of aim steady. Vertical wise, may have been a little bit different, but also that could literally be just the difference in velocity of each one of those bullets. So I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, I know it's hitting the bottom of the target. That was not the point. When I go out to shoot, I don't necessarily try to shoot the center out of the target, and the reason is, and I don't try to adjust every shot I make, because you can make your groups horrible and you could spend all day like beating your head against the wall, chasing around, especially if your load's not good, which it's a good thing to take your chronograph and your rifle, and when I'm first testing a load, I'll shoot 5 rounds of the exact same load, and I don't care where it's actually hitting on the target. I'm aiming at the exact same point, and that's what you should do. You should aim at the exact same point, shoot the 5 rounds, shoot and aim at the same point every time, and see if those 5 rounds hit in the same area. Your point of impact is not always going to be your point of aim when you're testing ammunition. And once you've got the load tested down and you get that really tight group that you're wanting, then move that to where you want that group to hit. Adjust your scope to where you want it to hit after you get the group. Because if you're trying to test ammunition and you get one that hits, say my first round, if I had a hit here, and then okay, well I want to adjust up here, and then my next round hit down below it, like a little bit lower, and then I adjust again, and then it hits a little bit lower, and then I adjust again, it hits a little bit lower, and I adjust again, and then and I keep moving this up, and then all of a sudden I get this round again that's shooting that velocity, and now it's shooting high, and then I'm having to adjust it back down. I'll never get it in the center if that's the way I do it. So focus on your group size first, and then move your point of impact. Adjust your scope for that. All right, now we're going to move on to the big boys. Let's see. And these are fun to look at just because of the size of the holes in the paper. But shooting that Rossi at 100 yards with open sights, I mean, look at how big those holes are. That is 45 caliber holes. I cast these bullets myself. They're almost as big as, they're actually bigger than the hole punch hole. If you didn't know that that's what that was, you'd consider that a bullet hole. But I did land one round pretty close to the middle, but the rest of them, they're all consistently on the left side of the target. So, but I did hit, every one of them actually touched the target all 10 rounds, so I was pretty happy with that. Again, shooting this off a bag and not out of the sled resulted in a pretty substantial difference in hit. You know, I'm not a great open sight shooter, and I would like to be better at it, but you know, that's just one of those things. And then I shot some loads that I tailored for the Browning High Wall 1885, and the grouping was quite a bit better. And this time, instead of it being off to the left side of the target, it was actually on the right side of the target, which I thought was interesting. Different rifles shoot different ways. And that's the thing, too, with these rifles. They're pretty old, and if the sights have been bumped on them at some point or another, I really need to take it to a gunsmith and shoot it and have it shot and then get everything readjusted perfectly back up in line. Because this is the results I get. And then the further I shoot out with it, the more and more it shoots off to, you know, a certain direction or side. But all in all, not bad shooting for, you know, hand loads and shooting rested off a bag, and plus having to deal with the recoil of those rifles. I don't own a firearm that recoils harder than that Rossi lever action. I haven't shot a gun that recoils harder than that Rossi lever action. Even like versus shooting my 50 BMG, I would rather shoot it all day than to shoot that Rossi. I mean, like 5-6 rounds out of it freaking hurt, and that's all there is to it. It weighs 4.5 pounds, and I did the calculations on the recoil, and the felt recoil on it is around 40 pounds because of the loads I'm using. So it's just one of those things. If they made a muzzle brake for them, it would be great, but you know. And then then I did some playing around, and I had traded, and speaking of my 50 cal, I traded my Noreen ULR 50 for a Savage Elite 110 in 338 Lapua. And the reasoning behind that was the range that I'm a member of and all the other ranges in the area around me with, you know, do not allow 50 caliber rifles. And it's just due to the fact that they're extremely loud and they actually destroy the targets they hit, you know, quite easily. And you know, when you're a member of a range or something, they don't want to be just constantly having to rebuild targets and everything. And so they just, you know, avoid the problem and they don't allow them. But they do allow 338 Lapua. So I got this Savage 110 Elite 338 Lapua Magnum, and it came with a Vortex Strike Eagle 5-25 scope on it, which I think I'm pretty pleased with. I've never shot a Vortex scope before, but I'm pretty happy with it. And anyways, when I finally got it on target, I shot this little group at 100 yards, shooting some hand loads that aren't mine. It's a .96 inch group, so it's under 1 MOA, but the only issue with that is it's a new rifle to me, and I'm not used to the way it recoils, and it's kind of different. Like, when you shoot, it reminds me of shooting the 50 cal. It doesn't hurt to shoot it, but it shoves you back pretty good, and I think in part of that slow-mo video that I included in here, you can actually see it if you go back and watch it. It shoves, the gun rocks back and then pushes you, and you know, and then your body catches up with the inertia of the recoil, and it comes back, I want to say probably close to 2 inches back. But luckily I didn't get scoped, and I'm glad that it doesn't recoil enough to scope me. I shot 10 rounds out of it and had no issues. And then once I got it, you know, on target the way I want it, because the previous owner had it zeroed for I think about 1,200 yards, and so I had to figure that out and re-zero it back down to 100. And then I did the math based on the velocities I was getting and the weight bullet I was using, and you know, and a known ballistic coefficient, and was very easily able to dial up to shoot 300 yards, and that was really fun for me to do. I'm kind of getting into long range shooting and kind of starting to learn how using a ballistic calculator works and how to you know, adjust your point of impact based on your dope, your data on previous engagement. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys stuck with me. I know this is kind of a long video, and I apologize for that. In the future, I'm going to try to shoot a little bit shorter videos here and there. I really am going to try, and one of the main things I wanted to do was I wanted to shoot the 454 Casull project that I've been working on with the 325 grain bullets. I was wanting to shoot those for accuracy, and I got halfway the range and realized I forgot the bullets, so I ended up not testing them at all. So next range day, we're going to go out, and I'm only going to test those rounds, bring that one rifle, and then I may do some pistol shooting, because I haven't shot any pistols in a while, and I need to practice. Everybody, if you're going to have a gun and carry it, or, whatever, or have one at your house that you use for your home defense weapon, you need to practice with it. You need to pick it up, you need to take it to the range, you need to shoot it. So I haven't shot any pistols in quite a little while, at least not actually practicing with them. I've shot some and tested ammunition for, velocity and whatnot through the chronograph, but as far as actually target shooting with them, I have not done any of that in probably a few months, several months. So we're going to do the ULR 454 Casull project. Again, I'm shooting those out of my Browning high wall with open sights. And as we see, most of the time it shoots a little bit right. So I'm going to test them at 25 yards, 50 yards, and then 100 yards. And then I think I'm only going to go to 100 yards this time, and then really see how they do. And then if I like the load data and the results I'm getting, I'm going to go ahead and load the rest of them. And then we will take them on out to 200 and 300 yards, where I will just be shooting a 18-inch steel gun, as I've done in the past. And I've had really good results in the past with these bullets, with the 300 grain versions, and I'm really hoping that the 325 grain ones give me at least as good results. I know that the velocity is going to be a little lower because they're a little heavier, but if I can get the velocity at least as consistent as I can get the 300 grain lead cast bullets, which in the single digits on extreme spread and velocity, that is really what I want to do. And one day I hope to be able to do that with my regular rifle ammunition too. But anyways, I've got just a ton going on in different projects, and hopefully I'll start lining it out and just focusing on one thing at a time, which I really need to do, and it'll allow me to do a better job. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time in the next video.